to invest heavily to give troops and their commanders the tools they need to beat ISIS. He also ramped up his battle against the news media. And before we got to all of that, though, he started, as he often does, by recapping his election victory. Jim Acosta tonight has more.
Heading into his third week in the White House, the president is still taking victory laps, this time in front of military commanders.
We had a wonderful election, didn't we? And I saw those numbers. And you like me, and I like you. That's the way it worked.
In a visit to U.S. Central Command in Florida, President Trump offered a dark world view of the global war on terrorism.
Radical Islamic terrorists are determined to strike our homeland, as they did on 9/11.
The president insisted to his military audience that the news media is intentionally downplaying the terror threat, but offered no proof to back up his claim.
All over Europe, it's happening. It's gotten to a point where it's not even being reported. And in many cases, the very, very dishonest press doesn't want to report it. They have their reasons, and you understand that.
Mr. Trump is also lashing out at recent polls that show the public is wary of his controversial travel ban, tweeting, "Any negative polls are fake news, just like the CNN, ABC, NBC polls in the election. Sorry, people want border security and extreme vetting." The president is making the case that he's in charge, despite recent reports that his top aides are largely dictating sweeping new administration policies, tweeting, "I call my own shots, largely based on an accumulation of data, and everyone knows it. Some fake news media in order to marginalize lies." The president isn't holding back on other issues, maintaining widespread voter fraud cost him the popular vote. Despite overwhelming evidence, he is wrong.
We can be babies, but you take a look at the registration. You have illegals, you have dead people.
After his tough talk on Obamacare, Mr. Trump now concedes overturning the health care law won't happen overnight, as he once promised.
I would like to say by the end of the year, at least the rudiments, but we should have something within the year and the following year.
And Jim, we should point out the White House now has released this list of terror attacks the president said the media is downplaying or not reporting on, right?
That's right, Anderson. I have it right here. 78 attacks since September of 2014, and the White House is careful to say that most of these attacks were not reported on adequately enough. But Anderson, just going through the list, there's no scoring system or grade system here to say, okay, these attacks were covered adequately, these attacks were not. And most puzzling of all, Anderson, inside this list, you see mentions of the Paris attacks where 129 people died, the San Bernardino terrorist attack, the Nice truck attack, and so on. And as you know, Anderson, these are all terrorist attacks that we covered days on end, not only here at CNN, but other international news outlets around the world. So this appears to be a talking point that is in search of a set of facts that just doesn't exist. The other thing we did not get an answer for is why the president made this claim today that the news media are not reporting on these attacks. He said, "I think you know why," to those military commanders today. But no explanation was given as to why the news media would not report terrorist attacks, given all of our coverage. It's just not true.
Jim Acosta, thanks very much. And keeping them honest, as Jim said, not only did we cover many of the attacks on that list the White House has released, we covered them heavily. I know because I was there on the ground reporting a number of them. 360 was in Ottawa, Canada, October 2014. That's on the list, where a gunman killed a reservist at the National War Memorial, where he was on duty at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. I was also in Orlando last June. That was on the list also, after 49 people were gunned down at the Pulse nightclub. I know because I flew there right after the news broke. December 2015, that was also on the list. San Bernardino, I was there. 14 people killed and 21 wounded in coordinated attacks. This was just a month after I reported on the carnage in Paris, where terrorists killed at least 130 people and wounded hundreds more in a series of attacks across the city. We were there pretty much all week. To be sure, we as a program did not cover each and every incident on the list. However, other programs, as well as CNN International, covered most, if not all of them, many of them exhaustively. So we have a lot to discuss tonight with the panel. Ryan Lizza, Maggie Haberman are back. Joining the conversation, CNN political commentators Kelly McEnany, Maria Cardona, and Matt Lewis. So, Maggie, I mean, President Trump falsely accusing the media, basically covering up terrorist attacks, not just underreporting, but intentionally not reporting on things.
I mean, he did what he often does, which is a bit of a rhetorical sleight of hand, where it sounds like what he is saying is that the media is covering up. He didn't actually say that, so now his supporters are saying that's not what he said. He did say that there's some kind of a hidden motive, without saying what it is, in why the media isn't giving, in his opinion, sufficient coverage. I agree with you. The media has been extensively covering terrorist attacks going back to the bombing of the USS Cole in 1990. I remember those. No, sorry, 2000. 2001 was obviously the 9/11 attacks. I had friends who I worked with at the New York Post who got sick breathing in the dust down there because they were down there every day. I covered it for years after rebuilding. So this is something that I think you're seeing President Trump take to a new level today, which is essentially that news that he doesn't like or news that he doesn't agree with, all polls are fake, that show something that I don't agree with. He is making the media into a bogeyman, and he's been doing that. His aides have been pretty open about doing it. His whole premise during the campaign was "believe me," and it's "I alone can fix it," and this is sort of the pinnacle of that.
But Ryan, to put out a list where Pulse nightclub is on it, where the Bataclan massacre is on it.
I mean, not to make light of this because it's a pretty serious conversation, but look, cable news has a well-known aversion to covering terrorist attacks. I mean, come on, it's the most important thing that we do at 24-hour news networks. I think the question, just as Trump was sort of insinuating that there was something behind the media's alleged lack of attention to terrorist attacks, the question it raises in my mind is what is the reasoning behind the White House trying to get all of us to focus so much on terrorism right now? Why is that? Why does the White House want us to focus on that? There have not been, thank God, a string of terrorist attacks in the United States recently, right? The numbers go up and down. It's not likely that any of us are going to die by terrorist attack, right? We all know there's a minuscule chance of that happening in the United States. So it makes me a little suspicious when government officials are pointing to things like terrorism without an explanation.
Matt, I mean, one of the arguments, supporters of what the president said, and if you look at InfoWars and stuff, where one of the arguments they make, which I assume the president is picking up on, is the notion that we're downplaying radical Islam in some of these terror attacks. The counter argument to that is initially, it's not our job to make a leap until authorities have said for sure this is a terrorist action or it's not. It's,
right.
But so I get people's criticism that, well, we don't report fast enough that this is a Islamic radical. But certainly, if there's proof of that, we report that. But
yeah, I think that's true. Look, I don't know where this is coming from. If anything, I think maybe the media overhypes terrorist attacks.
Well, that's another counter argument, which I get all the time from people watching.
I mean, it's horrific to say, but it's TV, and TV is about images and controversy. Controversy sells, images sell. If it bleeds, it leads, as they have said for a long time, long before cable news came along. So I think that Donald Trump is wrong about that.
The argument actually is interesting because, if you look, we actually have more coverage than ever before of any kind of attack because there's now cell phone cameras that document it. When a British soldier was beheaded, virtually beheaded on the streets, there was cell phone video
It actually ratchets up the terror.
Yes.
It partially does their job for them.
Right.
Well, but I think that part of the story here is, Ryan asked, what is Trump's end game? I don't know what it is, but one sort of theory would be, so he's getting this is a war against the media. It's not really about whether or not we cover terrorism enough. So God forbid, what if, we just had a whole discussion here as to whether or not people who are not even citizens of America have standing to come into America. I can imagine a lot of middle America folks out there, working class white Americans out there who are saying, why should Syrians come to America?
Right.
And God forbid, if there is an attack down the road, that judge, they will point to that judge. Right. And I think it's a larger narrative.
Look, I mean, the media does cover terrorist attacks. I remember the week of the Pulse nightclub shooting, the political panels were preempted the entirety of the week, from my recollection. So they do cover terrorist attacks. I think the better argument the Trump administration could make is whether in the commentary there is enough of a honest discussion about the times when immigration is connected to terrorist attacks. For instance, the 3 stabbings that happened last year at the Minnesota Mall, the Ohio State car attack, and also the Ohio attack on an Israeli deli. Those were all connected to immigration. The Afghan refugee who put bombs in New York and New Jersey, and thank goodness they were found. Donald Trump said today, we want good immigrants to be here. We want people who love this country here. But if he put the focus on the media and the commentators in particular not having a discussion on the honest
connection.
connection.
I think, though, to San Bernardino, where the wife came from Pakistan.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, there were endless stories, and it's fair to point out other stories where there weren't. This just jumped into my mind. We did a lot of stories on how did she come to the United States, how did they not see your social media postings, things like that.
And Pakistan is not even on the list of countries, right? So I have a theory to answer Ryan's question, and you touched a little bit upon it. I think he wants to blame the media or blame the judge to have everybody talking about terrorism so that there is a reason that the judiciary will give him standing to pass what he wants to pass. And the reason why I think that is so alarming and so dangerous is that I call January essentially what has come out of the White House is instill fear of Brown People Month. Because what they did with the Mexican wall, making Mexico pay for it, denigrating the Mexican president, what they're doing with this Muslim ban is essentially, again, to your point, you kind of touched upon this, is to make middle America, to make white America fear people with brown skin, whether it's Mexicans, whether it's Muslims. That is what he is trying to do.
No, it's a 90-day halt because someone got through our borders and killed American citizens and took their right to life.
Who?
It is factual. Tashin Malik in San Bernardino came here on a K-1.
So why isn't Pakistan on the list?
So to have a 90-day break, Somalia is on the list, and 25 people were wounded at the end of a knife because the Somali refugee got into this country. So to have a 90-day pause.
But didn't he get into this country as a child with his family?
He did, but we should take a pause.
And a lot of them were American citizens.
All right, coming up next,
not on the list.
we're going to continue this discussion in the next hour. President Trump's also decision to have Steve Bannon take a seat on the National Security Council. I'll talk it over with former Joint Chiefs Chairman Admiral Mike Mullen. He joins us in a moment.